Good evening all, and welcome to another jam-packed episode of MindSpace TV. Now, the role of ergonomics in the workplace, which is the study of people's efficiency in their workplace environment, is set to become more prominent once the draft ergonomics regulations, which will form part of the existing Occupational Health and Safety Act, come into effect. So it's time to have a discussion around this, and today on the show we chat to Urvashi Ramjee, who is the head of claims management at Old Mutual Corporate, and also Carol-Lynn Stirrat, an occupational therapist, about the broader impact the regulations will have on our workspace experience. Let us get cracking, because according to the 2017 Old Mutual Disability Monitor, disabilities related to musculoskeletal issues are the third leading cause for disability claims, and this is followed by stress and cancer. But what is driving this increase? Urvashi, perhaps you can kick off the conversation with us. What is driving this increase?
Thanks, Fifi. So we think it's a number of factors. What we're actually seeing is an increase in the number of claims. So people who are saying they're unable to work for various reasons. The big thing that we're seeing is that there's generally a trend around lifestyle-related illnesses that are coming through. It's manifesting in different forms. So it can be an injury, it can be something around your muscles and bones, it can be a psychiatric condition, stress-related, even cancer. So we definitely think lifestyle is a key issue in terms of why we're seeing more claims here. People are not looking after themselves, they're working in highly stressed environments.
Tell me about it.
Including us. Employers are demanding more and more from lesser resources, quite frankly, and I think people are struggling to make that adjustment. So how do I cope with this? How do I have resilience to manage myself in the workplace without it manifesting as a physical or psychological illness? So definitely lifestyle factors. There's a couple of other issues that we think. About 2 years ago our tax legislation changed, and we think that created more sort of an incentive for people to claim a little bit more. And then lastly, I think consumers are a lot more aware. So in our world, we sell disability insurance, or we provide disability insurance, and our consumers are much more aware that they have this product, and they're claiming a lot more. So yeah, those are some of the things we're seeing.
And Carol, just to bring you in here, why should employers be aware of this increase or be concerned about it?
Well, I think that it impacts on productivity, it impacts on absenteeism, presenteeism. If a person is unwell, if we stick to musculoskeletal disorders, if they're in pain or they are in discomfort, it can impact on their concentration. So perhaps their poor performance is going to go down. As I said, they might be absent more. It can have a whole sort of knock-on effect in terms of things. It can affect the efficiency that they do their jobs with, the safety. We could have more illness, more injuries, all of those sort of things. Yeah.
And then I suppose the next question would be to ask, what could employers do to combat this?
Yeah. And so we advise our employers to make sure that they've got a holistic sort of wellness type program, and that takes many forms. So it's having a doctor in the workplace, having an occupational health person in the workplace, an ergonomist, an occupational therapist, counseling services. Employers really need to focus on that, because truthfully, once you submit a claim at a disability stage, it's really too late. We try our best to manage and to help those people, but the focus has to be on early intervention.
Carol-Lynn, talk to me about ergonomics and this new act that's coming to the fore, and exactly what it means for the workplace.
So I think as occupational therapists, we are concerned about function, and we look at a person holistically. So perhaps a good way for me to explain how as an OT we would approach ergonomics in the workplace is to use one of the models that we have, and that's called the Peo Model. And that looks at the person, which in this case would be the employee, the environment, which is the context that the employee finds himself in, and the occupation, which is the job. And so those are the three components. And when we have a really good balance, we look at the interaction between these components. When we have a really good fit, we find that we have optimum function in the workplace. So we enhance productivity, the worker is comfortable, they're working safely, and they're working efficiently. When there's an imbalance between these three components, that is when we start having difficulties with physical or mental strain, and that can lead to a whole lot of illnesses and injuries in the workplace. So if I can perhaps give you an example, as an occupational therapist, we would take that employee, We need to determine what that employee's capabilities are, what their limitations are. Say, for example, they have a neck problem, they have a back problem, perhaps they've got carpal tunnel syndrome, okay? We then need to go in, so they can't sit for long, they can't walk far, they can't type for long. We then go into the environment, their particular work context, and we have a look at what is happening in that work environment. We might find that this person, when they get to work, has to park very far in the basement and walk a very long distance to their work area. They might be carrying a very heavy laptop bag. Their workstation might be completely incorrect for them. Their chair's wrong, their desk height is wrong, their computer's in the wrong place, and in the broader concept, maybe we've got clutter, we've got noise, all kinds of things. Then we have a look at their job, and we see that their job requires them, for example, as a programmer, to sit for the whole day, to keyboard for the whole day. So we can clearly see that we do not have a good match or a good balance between these three components. So as OTs, we then do the interface between that, and we adjust the environment and the occupation to make them comfortable and to get that optimal fit. And that's where those ergonomic regulations or recommendations come in. Perhaps we can advise that she parks closer to her office, that she doesn't have to walk so far. Perhaps we give her a trolley bag. We look at her chair, we look at ergonomics in her layout, and we actually promote comfort and that optimal fit.
Just going back to the high number of claims that you guys are currently experiencing, I mean, one has to wonder if you're still making money.
So it is impacting on profitability and quite frankly on the sustainability of the product. So our ability to provide disability insurance is now impacted, quite frankly. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And if I could just add in there, that is why I think our focus really much has to be on early intervention and early treatment. Because we know that if we intervene early and we get that individual the right kind of treatment, the targeted intervention, we can actually prevent that initial illness from becoming a disability. So our focus is, as we say, we identify early, we treat early, we keep the person at work by either modifying their job or putting reasonable accommodations into place, or if they have to go off work for a period of time, we really encourage early return to work.
Should these new buildings that do come up, should they be designing their offices with the whole ergonomics concept in mind? Are there advantages to doing it at the initial stage?
One should. I think there's a cost saver if you look at ergonomics in the design phase. If we try and go in and look at ergonomics when we've got a process running or things are set up, there's obviously going to be more cost involved. And if we prevent, we can save on all of those things, like we've said, the absenteeism, the presenteeism, your injuries becoming a disability. So there's a lot more cost incentive to prevent versus dealing with all the issues that come down the line.
So with office space being at such a premium right now, we've got these beautiful buildings all over Sandton.
Oh, you should be one of them.
Yes, definitely. And we're putting more and more people in these buildings. We've got to look at the ergonomics. It's not a nice to have anymore. It's a prerogative.
I mean, ladies, we're talking about prevention now, which is great for someone who's got the early mover advantage. But what happens if it's too late for you now? What happens then?
You mean you already have, say, for example, a neck or a back problem?
Exactly.
Well, then as occupational therapists, we still come in and we look at how we can actually prevent this from getting worse. So if you do have a neck or a back problem, we are going to look at the ergonomics of your workstation layout, because now we need to keep you comfortable and we need to prevent that from becoming a lot worse. So same principles apply.
Definitely.
We would perhaps have to refer out to other team members, maybe a physiotherapist, or we target that intervention to actually keep that person as healthy and as active and productive as possible in the workplace.
I also want to say, Fifi, so in terms of the ergonomics, in this day and age, there's a lot that can be done. So there's a lot of brilliant equipment and software and programs available to keep those people with the injuries in the workplace. So people with visual difficulties or back pain or something like that, there's phenomenal stuff out there that employers are looking at, and people are being creative around how do I stay in the workplace despite the fact that I get back pain after 20 minutes or something.
For sure.
A lot of people are talking about sit-stand desks. I don't know if you've seen them. They're beautiful. Your desk lifts, so you're not in one position all the time, which
But they also tend to be a bit pricey, though.
Not really. I think that is probably a myth about ergonomics, is we can do things very simply and they do not have to be expensive. But if we also just go back to the prevention, we actually need to educate and train employees about safe work practice and ergonomic principles and risk factors so that they can also self-manage in the workplace. And what has also come out quite strongly is that if we have a top-down approach, we have management buy-in to this. It creates much better morale of the workforce. It's good for the corporate culture. So we really need we said those policies and procedures in place to support this whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, for viewers wondering what Old Mutual is doing specifically in the ergonomics space, perhaps you can answer their question.
So our own beautiful building here in Sandton is we do have an ergonomics person here who consulted in terms of the design. We've got an in-house ergonomist for our staff, but for our clients and for our employees, we generally what we do is we link them with the right resources. So if we see a high number of claims coming through for back pain, for example, we say to employees, look, there's a problem here, perhaps in this division, or this type of worker is having a lot of neck pain. Can you do something around it? And we propose some interventions that they can use around the issue.
Karen, final thoughts on this topic?
I suppose as an occupational therapist, we really want to identify the risk factors. So we would go onto site, we would look at the risk factors to the employer, and like Urvashi said, simple things. Look at the correct chair, look at the layout of your workstation. You know, a lot of people, when they take a call and they're busy keyboarding, they put the phone in the crook of their neck. That is an awkward posture. So we know certain risk factors are going to cause musculoskeletal disorders. So we identify them and we eliminate them by using ergonomics and other approaches.
Ladies, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for debunking ergonomics and simplifying a rather complicated to pronounce concept. The fourth industrial revolution and digital disruption is upon us. Businesses need to adapt or die. The MindSpace team chatted to Professor Brian Armstrong about how this is going to impact all businesses in the future.
So I'm Brian Armstrong. For a long time I've been a businessman in the telco sector, tech sector in South Africa, Africa and beyond. But at the moment I'm at the Wit Business School. I'm the professor in the chair of digital business, and what I do there is I try and understand and make sense of this thing we call digital disruption and the fourth industrial revolution. When I was in business, I did a lot of speaking to clients around digitalization and digital change, and through that I got to know USB. They did some work for us when I was in business, and when I left they said, you know, they quite liked the way I spoke, they liked the subject matter of what I speak about, and would I like to join their team as one of their speakers. And that was really right up what I wanted to do, because along with doing the academic side of digital disruption, I also like to, how should I say, evangelize it and take it to the market, but also what's real and what's not real, what's hype, what's reality, what should we be optimistic about, what should we be pessimistic about, where should we be skeptical, where should we be believers. The question of why should businesses have a digital business strategy is a very good one, because there has been conflicting evidence about how much does digital disruption really drive business results and business outcomes. But recently there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the more digitally transformed businesses are across sectors, not just in the tech sector, but in the so-called traditional industries. There's a lot of evidence emerging that the more companies embrace ICT, the more they digitally transform themselves, the better their business performance is. Better business performance in terms of from shareholder value through to customer experience, through to revenues and profits. There's a lot of evidence suggesting that the more transformed you are, the better you perform. But to do it right, you need the right strategy, because you do get winners and losers in the digital economy. And I think our role as business people is always to make sure that our business is one of the winners, not one of the losers. I think all industries are ultimately at risk of being disrupted, but the time frames are a little bit different. So if we look at industries like media, ICT services, telecoms, they're already in what I call the digital vortex. They have been sucked in, they are already, have been, and are already being disrupted. Then there's probably two industries that are right on the threshold of digital disruption, which is financial services and retail. Over the next 5 years, I think those industries will see very dramatic disruptions. Well, let's take e-commerce and retail, for example. If you look at the UK, 20% of total retail sales are online. In China, 16% of total retail sales are online. In South Africa, depending on which data you look at, it's between 1 and 2% of total retail sales are online. And we will go from 1 or 2% to 10 to 20% over the next period of time, whether it's 5 years or 8 years or 10 years. Now, can you imagine a retail industry which loses 10 to 20% of its total retail sales to online? Now, a lot of the existing retail incumbents will successfully make that transition from being exclusively bricks and mortar retailers to being digital retailers, but some won't, and some will be seriously disrupted. So that's, for example, in the retail industry in South Africa. If we think about financial services, the banking industry in South Africa generated, in 2015, it generated about 60 billion rands worth of profit. When I speak to people in the industry, they freely acknowledge that at least 20% of that is likely to be disrupted or displaced over the next 5 to 10 years. So can you imagine 20% of 60 billion, in other words, about 12 billion rands worth of profit in the banking industry being disrupted? So that is, transactional banking is going to change. The payments systems are going to change. But then there's a few industries where they will be disrupted, but perhaps over a slightly longer time frame. Professional services. I think we're already seeing law, for example, consultancy. They're already starting to talk about how does AI and digital technology start impacting on their markets. Consumer, fast-moving consumer goods. Brands, I think there's going to be a lot of disruption there. Manufacturing had its first wave probably in the 80s and 90s with robotics and automation. Proper digital disruption with full digital supply chain management, that's going to come. I think it's important that we recognize that we need to be careful that disruption doesn't come only from a narrow interpretation of digital technologies. Disruption can come from the broader so-called fourth industrial revolution, where other technologies are changing demand and consumption patterns. So for example, as the world moves away from diesel and petrol to electrically powered vehicles, demand for platinum is dropping. So for example, in South Africa, the mining sector, our basket of minerals, the stuff that we mine, is becoming increasingly in less demand in the world, where other minerals are becoming in higher demand. The issue of the future of work and the future of jobs is one of the critical challenges that, in my opinion, South Africa and the world faces over the next decade or two. Now, if you look at the research, the predictions on the impact of the future of work vary quite widely. So what we've done at the Wit Business School is we've looked at 305 papers, proper, serious papers, on the future of research. We took out all the duplicates and so on and narrowed it down to 16 seminal pieces of research on the future of work, and looked at what do they predict about the way work is going. And some are optimistic and some are pessimistic. But the bad news is that the pessimists outweigh the optimists by 14 to 2. And broadly speaking, the predictions on the impact of the future of work is that anywhere between 10 and 50% of jobs, and not so much jobs, but tasks that are executed in the workforce today will be automated in about 10 years. The time frames of these studies differ, but over a period of about 10 years, 10 to 50% of the tasks that we currently execute in the economy will be automated. What there's less consensus on is how many new jobs will be created, because as in any technology revolution, we've always found that as technology comes in and replaces some jobs, other new ones are created. There's a wide diversity of opinion on how much new jobs being created will offset jobs being automated. But the challenge there for South Africa and most emerging economies is there's no guarantee that jobs that are created in place of the jobs that are destroyed by automation, there's no guarantee that those will be in the same place. So how do we ensure, as we think about jobs in South Africa in the future, that A, we have a good insight into what are the jobs of the future? Where are the opportunities for new categories of work that automation will enable and that this new digital age will enable? So understand what they are. B, understand the skills that are necessary to really do those well and to be the best at doing those in South Africa and abroad. And C, what do we need to do in South Africa to make sure that we get our fair share, or preferably even more than our fair share, of the new global jobs created in new categories that we haven't even thought of now. Banking employs about 240,000 people, of which about 70,000 are, you could call it, clerical work. Now, in my opinion, a significant part of that 70,000 jobs can be automated through robotic process automation. Now, that's white-collar work, and that is going to be significantly impacted within the 5-year time frame. And suddenly, possibly 10% to 20% of the banking industry will be exposed to thinking about, what job should I be doing in the future compared to what did I do in the past. Another challenge in the digital era that we need to start thinking through is the very essence of the ethics of digitalization. So the usual simple example that's always mentioned, the ethics of AI. If your self-driving car is confronted with an accident situation, how does it choose to minimize the impact of that accident? But that's a fairly narrow and it's a fairly poppy example of the ethics of AI. But as we move more and more into the digital world, the ethics of privacy, the ethics of artificial intelligence, the ethics of tax law and redistribution, there are incredible ethical, governance and moral challenges that we are going to have to confront in a mature way. You might recall about a year ago there was a public Twitter spat between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, where Elon Musk, along with a lot of well-informed people, are saying, guys, we need to start thinking about this AI genie that we're letting out of the bottle, and we need to think about how we regulate it, because if we don't think about it now, by the time we do, it will be too late. AI is actually quite an interesting topic. When I was at university 30 years ago, a lot of the basic science of AI already existed. So fuzzy logic, neural networks, that stuff, the science already existed. What has changed over the last 20 to 30 years? So firstly, the science of AI has improved. The algorithmic understanding, the science has improved. But more importantly, the computational power that we now have at our disposal has exploded beyond anything we could think of 20 or 30 years ago. So we now have the computational muscle and horsepower to do these really computationally intensive algorithms that in the past we never had were able to do. The third thing that's changed is the internet has brought the training data, has made training data, because most artificial intelligence requires that you expose the algorithm to a vast amount of training data. And it says if these were the inputs and these were the outcomes, the AI figures out the relationship between the two, but you need great training data for that. So we've got more training data. And then the fourth thing that's changed is the ecosystem. We're now starting to see an ecosystem building for applications of AI and integrating AI into business processes and social processes and consumer products. So now AI in a smartphone, it's like not sci-fi anymore, it's real, right? Okay, there's varying degrees of AI. So I think we are on the cusp of an AI wave. How we prepare for this is probably the key question which we're researching at the business school and which most business leaders are thinking about. I think it's important to recognize when we think about digitalization and the fourth industrial revolution, let's just maybe take a step back, because we are too tempted to immediately dive into the technology. So we talk about digitalization and immediately we want to start talking about AI and coding and the Internet of Things and so on. But the fourth industrial revolution, or digitalization, is so powerful and so transformative, not just because of the tech. it has got two other critical ingredients which we also need to understand and master if we want to really prosper in the future. And those two other ingredients are firstly the way society and the market is changing. It used to just be the millennials that wanted personalized, instant gratification, always on social media and so on. But now we all want that. We all are active consumers, we're all becoming active citizens, we're all becoming socially connected and socially networked. And for example, I would suggest that companies like Twitter and Facebook are more a reflection of the society that we now find ourselves in than they are about the tech. The tech is fine, it works, but it's not fundamentally about the tech. It is about how we're engaging as society and as markets. And the second additional critical ingredient besides the technology is changing ways of doing business. So everybody's now talking about platform business models, but things like crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, agile, design thinking, various different models like B2B2C and direct consumer marketing and direct commerce. These are all new models which are emerging. And again, if I can use some examples, I would suggest that Uber and Airbnb are more about the business model than they are about the tech. Again, the tech's fine, it works, but it's fundamentally more about the business model. So to really thrive and prosper in a digital age, we need to understand, yes, there is a technology revolution. How do we harness that for our business strategy? But we really need to understand how is the market and society changing that we are part of. But also, what are the new ways of doing businesses, new business practices, new business models, new tools in the business science toolkit that we need to bring to bear? And if we can bring those three together in an intersection, then we can really thrive and prosper.